Now, on Hormuz, uh, the Americans, I think, realize that that is a card which the Iranians will simply not give away. So they've tried to counter that by this blockade. Now, how this blockade works, we don't know. At least to my mind, the next 72 to 96 hours can be very tricky. By choking off 20% of the world's hydrocarbon through controlling the Strait of Hormuz, the Iranians have converted the Iran war into a global war. The Ukraine war impacted parts of the globe. The Iranians are concerned, they've taken an enormous beating. Huge amount of pain has been inflicted on them, but they haven't surrendered. I think that is a reality. 21 hours of talks, but yet in those talks they did not surrender. They held certain positions, and that is why the next step is blockade. And then they'll hit back and try to cause mayhem in the Arab Gulf countries. The UAE comes to mind, Qatar comes to mind, Bahrain. Now, can the world afford that? To me, that is a nightmare scenario even for us. After all, in this region, we have 90 lakhs to a crore of people.
Hello and welcome. You're watching me, Sanket Upadhyay, on The Federal. The show is called AI with Sanket. This is the AI of news because news in India today requires not artificial but analytical intelligence. Talks happened in Islamabad. There was expectation, however stretched, that there will be peace. That did not happen. The talks or the negotiations did not sail through, but there was another thing where the sailing through has been stopped, and that is the Strait of Hormuz. It has not just happened from Iran, where a blockade has been imposed, a sort of a toll booth exists that Iran chooses which vessel of which ship is going to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Now America has decided that there will be a blockade on their part as well. America says, whatever Iran may clear from the Strait of Hormuz, we will not clear anything. So they have imposed a fresh blockade further down from the Strait of Hormuz. What does this mean for world trade? Now it's not just Iran which has caused a blockade, it's America too. And the more interesting point here is that so far the Iranians had cleared the ships of some countries, particularly China, a big global economic superpower, which was so far unaffected by the Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz, but now will be affected because of the United States blockade. Will China enter into a more direct conflict with America because of this blockade? And could this spell trouble for many countries, including India, that if there is a violation of ceasefire from both sides, then Iran may choose to hit, as it has done in the past, the Gulf countries where a lot of Indians reside? What is the future of this war simply because the negotiations did not bear fruit over the weekend in Islamabad? We discuss with Ambassador Vivek Katju. So joining us right now is Ambassador Vivek Katju. Thank you very much, Ambassador Katju, for joining us. There were negotiations that took place over the weekend. There were a lot of eyes of suspicion here in India on whether Pakistan can, as they say in Hindi, 900 chूहे खाकर बिल्ली हज को चली, which basically means that you preach peace and look who's preaching. Having said that, Pakistan has positioned itself as a principal negotiator in this case. However, the negotiations failed. So I want to begin by asking you, what do you think about peace as far as this war is concerned? What precious little did these negotiations do?
Look, on the first point, I think, Sanket, I've negotiated a lot with the Pakistanis. I've also done some negotiation with the Iranians in my time. I think on Pakistan negotiating or being an intermediary, we've got to look at facts objectively. We have a certain view of Pakistan, and we are perfectly right in having that view. I have the same view. I think their record of being involved in violence in India is deplorable. It's something that is shocking and is something forgivable as far as we are concerned. But experience as a diplomat has taught me that the way we look at a country need not be the way others look at it. Everyone is guided by experience and interests in these issues. So when you say that the talks have failed, I refer you to the terminology that has been used, that an agreement was not reached, and that doors have been kept open by both sides to further negotiations. So yes, the Pakistanis, I think, fervently desired that there will be, as Arakchi has said, an MOU, a memorandum of understanding emerging from these marathon 21-hour talks. And the Pakistanis must have been devastated, not only disappointed, but devastated that this was not done. But it doesn't mean that we should conclude from this that there is an end to Pakistan's intermediary role. These are the objective factors. I mean, it might be a one-off thing in Islamabad. It might happen again. We simply don't know as yet. So that is as far as Pakistan is concerned. Second, at the moment, we all know the ceasefire is holding. I think it's been a good 36 hours now, almost, since Vice President Vance announced that no agreement had been reached, and he immediately left thereafter for Washington. And in this period, the ceasefire is held. Yes, what is extremely disturbing is that Trump has decided to impose a blockade, a naval blockade on ships going and coming from any part of the Iranian coast, and that this blockade will go into operation at, according to CENTCOM, at 7:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time today. We've got to just wait and watch how things transpire after that.
Which is why I come to my next point, Ambassador Katju. Any negotiations that take place, and you're right, the diplomatic terminology is that we failed to arrive. We did. It was inconclusive. In the media, the correct word to use is talks inconclusive, and that diplomatically does not translate into talks failing. However, for the ease of people's understanding, I use those words. However, having said that, what does this mean for the war in itself and the region, the Strait of Hormuz, bombs, allies, all those things?
Let's take this step by step. First of all, the ceasefire was declared as fragile, and I think that was the right term, and it is still fragile. But interestingly, the Americans and the Iranians have not given any indication that it will not hold as of now. Second, the Iranians and the Americans both have indicated, either directly or through sources, what are the points of differences. Because if you recollect, Vance said that there were some things on which we could accommodate the Iranians, and we told them so. I'm paraphrasing what he said. And there are some things we told them we could not accommodate. Now, the first thing on which there is, from the American side, there is no accommodation is nuclear. The nuclear issue, the Americans have made it plain that they don't want the Iranians to have a nuclear weapon or come anywhere close to acquiring a nuclear weapon. And for that purpose, nuclear enrichment is an essential prerequisite. And the Americans have indicated no enrichment at all. Now, this is not a new thing. This is an old thing. It was the JCPOA tried to finish it, and it did, but then Trump walked away from it. So the issue got reopened. The second is Hormuz. Now, on Hormuz, uh, the Americans, I think, realize that that is a card which the Iranians will simply not give away. So they've tried to counter that by this blockade. Now, how this blockade works, we don't know. At least to my mind, the next 72 to 96 hours can be very tricky. I, for one, am keeping my fingers crossed that they work smoothly and that nothing inflammatory happens. Now, the rest of the issues are things on which I feel that there is some play. Not entirely, but there is some play, some room for maneuver. And say the issue of reparations, I don't think the Americans will give much, but some formula can be found by which some funds are released to the Iranians. I think that's one thing. Then on matters whether Iran would be allowed to retain some self-defense apparatus, again, that's something which the parties can discuss. So the point I'm coming to is that on these issues there'll be some play, but nuclear, I think there's no play at all as far as the Americans are concerned. And it was interesting what Vance said on his return to Washington. He said that as far as the right is concerned, you can have the right. But what they are saying is, again, I'm paraphrasing, is that you will not operationalize the right. So it's a very interesting nuance there, Sanket. They are saying that you can retain the right, but you will not operationalize it. We are not commenting it. It's a very interesting maneuver, diplomatic maneuver, where they say, again, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I think it's worth repeating. Repetition, that they're saying that, look, you can, we are not concerned with your right. What we are concerned with is its operationalization, and that you will not do.
No, very interesting. And however, with JD Vance saying it, it makes more sense because, frankly, I'm having a tough time in explaining and understanding what Trump's position is vis-a-vis points of negotiation. Now, Ambassador Katju, again, one by one, I would like to begin with the Strait of Hormuz and this, for lack of a better, likening, this is almost like toll booth war which is happening on the Strait of Hormuz. So there is one toll booth of the Iranians, and now there is a blockade, also known as toll booth of the Americans. How do you see this play out? You say the next 72 hours are going to be interesting, but are we to expect that the ships that are being released by the Iranians for friendly countries against money, all those may be blocked by the Americans, which will then irk, for instance, say China?
Look, it's interesting what you say. And here you mentioned Trump, and trying to decipher what Trump has said is a very difficult task. I think it can be a whole time occupation of someone trying to do. But what did he say in his Truth Social post yesterday? He said it will block any movement through the Strait of Hormuz. that if you come through the Strait of Hormuz, we'll block you. And second, he said that any ship which has paid a toll to the Iranians for passage through the straits, we will interdict it. The blockade will operate against it. That is not what has been said by the CENTCOM. I saw the CENTCOM press release very closely, and they have said that any ship which comes from the Iranian coast, we have blockaded it. So it is a blockade against Iran, and they specified it further by saying that this will apply to Iranian ports, both in the Arabian Gulf. That's an interesting term because the general, I think, term is Persian Gulf or just Gulf, but they've said Arabian Gulf, and in the Gulf of Oman, and any point on the Iranian coast. However, they've specifically said that this will not apply to maritime traffic emanating from other areas in the Gulf. So technically, they have kept quiet on any, say, a vessel carrying a Panama flag, a flag of convenience, and transiting through the Strait of Hormuz, and they pay a toll to the Iranians. Now, later on, that will become very contentious, but for the time being, they pay a toll to the Iranians. CENTCOM advisory or press release does not say that they will stop it. They don't say that.
Then, Ambassador
Because
Katju, who do you believe? What will happen then?
the CENTCOM advisory, because that is the operational advisory which has been given out to all the mariners. Trump's Truth Social is one thing, but CENTCOM are the people who are operationalizing the blockade. So that is why I was saying that there are these dichotomies, and one has to see what is actually going to happen on the ground. But also because of that, I said that the next 72 hours are going to be difficult because there will be a certain amount of confusion. Now, quite clearly, the American desire is to choke off any funds emanating from hydrocarbons as far as Iran is concerned. Choke their funds off. How will the Iranians counter it? They've called it, I read that, I think someone commented from Iran that it's an act of piracy. No, I don't know whether that's apt, but certainly they'll have to react in some manner. I only hope that they don't react by attacking targets in the Arabian Gulf countries, Arab Gulf countries, because they'll say you're choking off our funds, we'll choke off their funds. Because look, let's face it, by choking off 20% of the world's hydrocarbons through controlling the Strait of Hormuz, the Iranians have converted the Iran war into a global war. The Ukraine war impacted parts of the globe. But I put it to you that this war is qualitatively different. That perhaps this is the first war. No, I'm subject to correction and we can have an analysis on this. But I think, Sanket, this is the first war after the Second World War which has had such a major global impact. The Vietnam War didn't. The Afghan War didn't. I'm not talking of the Cold War. Obviously, the Cold War had a geopolitical impact which was enormous, but I'm talking of shooting wars.
Yeah, the Gulf War also of the 80s.
The Gulf War of the 80s did not. It did not choke off 20% of the world's oil. Oil continued to flow. Yes, there was a time when there were mines in the waters of the Persian Gulf, and in 1987, if memory serves me right, the Americans escorted the tankers, and there were some problems because some of these mines struck some of the tankers despite the escort. So the point I'm making is that now it's a game of chicken. Hence, I've said it's going to be dangerous. Because if you're choking off their funds, then how will they react? So that is why if they attack, then will this unravel? Now, we are speculating, but in war, these questions are there.
And I wanted to ask you, Ambassador Katju, is it even, I know theoretically and even practically to some extent it is possible to ensure a blockade. However, the control of the Strait of Hormuz and the blockade that America wants to impose is spread over a larger area, which means there will be a larger area to control. Secondly, none of the American allies are supporting them in this blockade. None.
Look,
None of the NATOs.
Look, why is Hormuz blocked? Because the insurers are unwilling to insure vessels. The blockade will also, to my mind, have the same impact. And no tanker will move without insurance. So that is where the problems arise. Yes, we'll have to wait and watch how do the Chinese act.
That was my next question. Because you see, Ambassador Katju, with Strait of Hormuz in Iranian control, you give them money or you are a friendly country. So it was Iran's game. With this blockade, now suddenly you will be irking another set of people who are potentially neutral right now, who are not joining or are not party to this war. But could this irk them to become a party in this conflict?
Let me draw your attention to Venezuela. I've in an article which I wrote today, I've said that this is out of the Venezuela playbook. Now, as far as Venezuela blockade was concerned, it was only against tankers. This is against all maritime traffic from Iran. That was against tankers going to and fro from Venezuelan ports. But in actual fact, no one was willing to go there once the Americans had this blockade. The Chinese, the Russians, many South American countries condemned it. But the Chinese didn't go further. Now, naturally, Venezuela is very different from Iran. Venezuela is part of the Western Hemisphere, and it has been a traditional American position that is their sphere of influence. And if you see the security doctrines of the Trump administration, it's reinforced that many-fold. So people kept out, and I think the Chinese too kept out. In fact, one of the reasons it is speculated that all this was done was because the Venezuelans, Maduro was wanting to sell oil to the Chinese in yuan. And the Americans, that's a no-no, big no-no for them. Now, what will the Chinese do? I think they'll condemn it, like in Venezuela, they'll condemn it, they'll do this. But will they try to physically send their state-owned tankers, if they have any, to take on the Americans physically? That's going to be a very inflammatory thing. And the Chinese, if you see their style of diplomacy, they hit back differently. They'll make their point known that Trump is supposed to go there in May. I think that visit was rescheduled for May, his visit to Beijing. And there's a lot at stake in that visit for both countries. That visit, and will that get postponed? One doesn't know. So that is why I'm saying that the next 72 to 96 hours are full of questions. And frankly, we can speculate, but we can't get an answer. But my best guess is that the Chinese will not have a direct confrontation with the Americans on this.
In your wisdom, what can be the Chinese? I know this is all hypothetical right now because we don't know whether that will happen. But assuming the blockade also affects China, then what is the traditional way in which China responds? Of course, if they don't take on militarily, then what else do they do?
Look, I must confess to you straight away that there are colleagues, former colleagues, who would be in a much better position to answer this, and I can name them and you can ask them. Ashok Kant, for example, Vijay
Sure.
Gokhale, both of them absolutely outstanding on China. They would be in a better position. But my own sense is that the Chinese have a range of options. I mean, starting from postponing this meeting, this trip, to uh, denying Americans again, say rare earths, again, all that issue, the trade issue can be opened. Yes. Because the Chinese and everyone knows that what is Trump's Achilles heel going forward? It's the midterm election and inflation, rising inflation in America. So the question mark is that how long can he sustain this? And as far as the Iranians are concerned, they've taken an enormous beating. Huge amount of pain has been inflicted on them, but they've not said they have, they haven't surrendered. I think that is a reality. 21 hours of talks, but yet in those talks they did not surrender. They held certain positions, and that is why the next step is blockade.
My final question.
One last point, if I may
Yes, sir.
mention. Uh, I think preparations are being made by European powers and the Americans to sweep the Gulf of Hormuz for mines and then to try to open it. The Iranians have said that if there are any naval vessels, we'll fire on them. That will bring about a new and more dangerous dimension. That is why I'm saying again and again the next 72 to 96 hours are going to be difficult, and we will really have to wait and watch.
And which is why I come to my final question. Do you feel that this ceasefire is just on very thin ice, and one will have to wait and watch?
I suspect that there'll be some powers, like Israel, for example, comes to mind. I would even go to the extent of saying the Saudis. The Emiratis are in a more difficult situation, UAE guys, but so I'm not so sure. But they might be wanting that the ceasefire fails and there's another round of bombing. Now, what can there be? Let's examine this. What can be bombed? They can bomb Iran's power structure. They can bomb civilian areas. They can bomb energy, hydrocarbons. That means there'll be an enormous pain inflicted on Iran. The question is, will the Iranians surrender with that beating, or they won't? The chances are that they won't, and that they'll hit back and try to cause mayhem in the Arab Gulf countries. The UAE comes to mind, Qatar comes to mind, Bahrain. Now, can the world afford that? To me, that is a nightmare scenario even for us. After all, in this region, we have 90 lakhs to a crore of people. I did some rough back of the envelope calculation. I think if you take 5 South Asian countries, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, I think there are more than 2 crore people there. It's a nightmarish scenario, especially if desalination plants are hit. So again, it's a question of which way will we go, and that is why today Trump has said, I think, that the ceasefire is holding. And the Iranians have given no indication that it will not hold. Whether the blockade will put a train of circumstances in operation which will lead to eroding the ceasefire, and that would, as I mentioned to you, be pushed, that process of breaking the ceasefire be pushed by the Iranians, by the Israelis and the Saudis to an extent, we don't know. It well may be. So, I'm sorry, I can't give you definitive answers because there
No,
are no
yeah,
there
yeah,
are no
exactly. No,
definitive
I realize,
answers.
which is why I said, sir. I mean, it all appears in the realm of possibilities. However, it's hypothetical. So I know, I understand, and you've laid all the probabilities out for us. Thank you so much, Ambassador Katju.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure talking to you, sir.